The moment I saw the name on the corner office door, my stomach tightened. Ethan Ward, the man who destroyed my career and told me I'd never succeed without him. What he didn't know. In less than an hour, the board would announce I was his new boss. If you've ever dreamed of proving someone wrong so completely they can't even speak, hit subscribe right now. Like this video and stay to the end, because this isn't just revenge, it's a masterclass in taking back your power. The first thing I noticed when the elevator doors opened was the scent, polished marble, expensive leather, and a hint of lavender diffuser. Blackstone Global didn't just smell like money, it smelled like control. I stepped onto the 47th floor wearing a navy suit that whispered professionalism and a temporary badge clipped to my lapel that screamed underestimated. The badge said, Clara Hayes, Junior Executive. But the contract I signed 2 weeks ago said something very different, Chief Operations Officer. The board wanted my appointment to remain confidential until the official restructuring announcement. It was strategic. They wanted me to observe, uncover what was broken, and see exactly who was causing the damage. But I had already done my homework. I knew the name stamped on the corner office. I knew who I'd be facing. Ethan Ward, my ex. My former boss. The man who once stared across a glass desk and told me, you'll never be successful without me. I clutched my notebook a little tighter, stepped out of the elevator, and forced my face into the same calm expression I had practiced in the mirror for weeks. Behind every smile I would offer today, there would be 3 years of late nights, failed contracts, caffeine, rebuilding, and absolute silence, all building to this moment. A few heads turned as I passed the open plan desks. Whispers trailed behind me like the scent of Ethan's cologne. Is that the new girl? She's junior exec. Thought she was a board contact. The confusion worked in my favor. I approached the temporary workspace the admin team had prepared, a modest desk with a clean view of the executive corridor. Right across from Ethan's glass office. Perfect, I'd requested the spot personally, cloaked as an anonymous suggestion to HR during a floor optimization meeting. The irony made me smile. As I settled in, the door to the corner office opened, and he walked out. Ethan Ward. Same tailored suit. Same arrogant stride. Same eyes that used to dismiss me during every meeting at our old firm. He hadn't changed. Not even a little. He glanced around, catching sight of me. There was a beat, recognition, confusion, and then satisfaction. He didn't know my title. Just the badge. He sauntered over, already wearing that condescending smirk that used to make my skin crawl. Well. Clara Hayes, he said, voice dripping with fake surprise. Didn't expect to see you here. He looked at my badge and chuckled. Junior exec, huh? Cute. Guess we all start somewhere. I tilted my head, feigning a smile. Good to see you, Mr. Ward. Oh, come on, he said, leaning a little too close to my desk. No need to be so formal. You and I have history. Yes, we did. A long trail of it. Starting from the time he used my digital transformation proposal and pitched it as his own. Ending the day he sabotaged my promotion, then dumped me with the classic line, this isn't personal. You're just not ready for the big leagues. I didn't say any of that. I just nodded and flipped open my notebook. You'll be reporting directly to me, he said, straightening his tie. It's a fast-paced environment here. I hope you're ready to keep up. I wrote something meaningless on my pad and replied, I'm very thorough with my work. You'll see. Oh, I remember, he said, tone sliding between mockery and nostalgia. You always tried hard. The elevator chimed behind him. I glanced past his shoulder and saw a familiar face, Board Chairman Roland Beckett, flanked by 2 senior members. They didn't acknowledge me. Not yet. Not in front of him. Not until 10 a.m. That's when the real title on my contract would go public. When the mask would come off, and the board would announce me as their new COO. Ethan didn't know the storm rolling his way. Not yet. I hear there's a big meeting at 10. I asked, voice light. He grinned, tapping his phone. Yeah, the board's announcing some pointless restructure. You'll want to take notes, Junior. Looking forward to it, I said. He left me there, basking in the glow of what he thought was his victory, the moment he believed I was beneath him again. But I watched him walk away with the calm of someone holding a secret. Because I already knew what was in the folders Chairman Beckett carried. I had written them. Audits, reports, proposals, all compiled in secret, revealing how Ethan's leadership had slowly eroded Blackstone from within. Creative accounting, inflated numbers, a culture of fear. And me? I wasn't just here to replace him. I was here to rebuild everything he had broken, without him even realizing I was the one holding the match. My phone buzzed. A single message from Chairman Beckett. You ready? I typed back. Let him think he's won. It makes the fall so much sweeter. Outside the glass wall, Ethan laughed with another exec. The clock above his office door read 9:02 a.m. In exactly 58 minutes, the building's power dynamic would shatter. And Ethan Ward, the man who once told me I'd never make it without him, was about to realize I'd become everything he feared, without needing him at all. By 9:15 a.m., the entire executive floor was buzzing. The kind of buzz that came from whispers passed too quickly, glances held too long, keyboards that suddenly fell silent as someone walked past. It was the sound of anticipation, and I had spent weeks orchestrating it from behind the scenes. I sat at my borrowed desk, pretending to scan departmental reports, though I already knew more about Blackstone's operations than most of the managers. I had read the data, tracked the gaps, and interviewed department heads under the guise of consultation. What they didn't know was that their frustrations, when shared, helped fuel the plan I would unveil at 10 sharp. The air shifted slightly. A shadow fell across my desk. I didn't have to look up. I knew that scent, woodsy cologne, faintly over-applied. Still getting settled? Ethan asked, leaning against the edge of my desk like it was his stage. I like to observe before I act, I said lightly. He smirked. That startup you worked at, what was it? Embercore. How'd that go for you after we parted ways? I met his gaze, unflinching. Let's just say it was enlightening. You should know, he added, with a hint of warning, we play in a different league here. No room for mistakes. No second chances. I could feel the eyes of nearby employees pretending not to watch. Phones paused mid-scroll. Coffee mugs lingered mid-sip. I leaned forward just slightly and said, then I guess it's a good thing I don't make the same mistakes twice. His smile faltered for half a second, not long, but enough. He tried to recover with a laugh, brushing off his sleeve like my words didn't sting. But I saw the way his brow tightened. A voice interrupted the awkward silence. Mr. Ward, his assistant called from across the floor. The board would like to see you in the executive lounge. Now. He frowned. They're early. They said it's urgent. He gave me one last glance before turning, and for a second, I thought I saw it, doubt. As he disappeared down the hallway, I exhaled slowly. My pulse had quickened, but not from fear. From control. Every move so far had been calculated. Let him think he held the reins. Let him walk into that room blind to what was coming. I stood up and walked to the restroom, not because I needed a break, but because I needed a mirror. I stared at the reflection, the woman in the navy suit, the woman with the wrong badge and the right plan. 3 years ago, I had left an office crying, humiliated, discarded. Now I was standing in a skyscraper I helped rescue from internal collapse, about to assume one of the most powerful roles in the company. Ethan had handed me this opportunity without realizing it. By tearing me down, he forced me to rebuild stronger, smarter, sharper. He taught me exactly how to win in this world, by showing me what failure looked like. When I returned to my desk, a message from Chairman Beckett was waiting. Boardroom prepped. Projector ready. We go live at 10 sharp. Attached was a PDF, the slideshow I had refined for weeks. First slide. Operational waste under current leadership, $48 million in lost opportunity. Second slide. Projected gains within 90 days, plus $23M post-restructure. Every chart, every audit trail, every dotted line, led back to Ethan. Not out of cruelty. Out of necessity. The man was bleeding the company dry, through outdated systems, biased promotions, inflated expenses, and toxic leadership. And he had gotten away with it for years. Until someone stopped being scared of him. I replied with a simple, ready. When I looked up, I saw Janet from HR approaching with 2 cups of coffee. I figured you'd need one, she said with a small smile. You're holding up well. I've waited 3 years for this hour, I replied. I think I'm okay. She leaned in, lowering her voice. He doesn't suspect anything. He will. He keeps calling you the temp. Says he'll probably replace you before Christmas. Let him, I said. She laughed softly. God, I can't wait to see his face. Neither could I. As she walked away, I checked the time. 9:34, 26 minutes to detonation. I took a slow sip of the coffee and stood up. Not to pace. Not to overthink. Just to look around. People were curious. And starting to talk. I saw heads turn toward the conference hallway where board members were gathering. I saw my name, whispered once, then twice, pass like a spark in a room full of dry kindling. And then, across the floor, Ethan reappeared. His face was stiff. His jaw tense. He didn't walk so much as stalk toward me, like a man trying to put a fire out before it spread. Clara, he said sharply. Come with me. I raised an eyebrow. Is there an issue? I need to show you something. In my office. I followed. Not because I had to. But because I wanted to see his world one last time before it fell apart. Inside, his office was pristine. A high-rise view. Mahogany desk. The trappings of someone who had grown far too comfortable. He closed the door. I just got out of a very strange conversation with the board. I waited. They said you've been involved in restructuring proposals. That you've been consulting with department heads. That your reports influenced their upcoming changes. I've had conversations, I said carefully. He stepped closer, voice hardening. What are you playing at? I met his eyes. No games, Ethan. Just doing what I was hired to do. And what exactly is that? I smiled, slow and steady. You'll find out in 20 minutes. His mouth opened, then closed. The silence between us was taut, brittle. I turned and opened the door. I'll see you in the boardroom, I said over my shoulder. As I walked away, I heard nothing. No quip. No threat. No laugh. Just silence. The kind that only happens when someone finally realizes they're not the one holding the knife anymore. Back at my desk, I packed my notebook, tablet, and the folder labeled Phase 1, Transition Plan. As I zipped my bag, I looked at the clock. 9:41 a.m. 19 minutes to the meeting. 19 minutes until Ethan Ward's illusion of control cracked like glass. And I would be there, not just to witness it. To lead it. At exactly 9:50 a.m., I stood just outside the double glass doors of the executive boardroom. The hallway was quiet, unnaturally so, like the calm before a corporate earthquake. The hum of emails, the clicking of keyboards, the coffee chatter, all had faded behind me. Inside the boardroom, Blackstone's leadership was assembling, 12 members, hand-picked by shareholders and tasked with guiding the company's billion-dollar trajectory. Every one of them had seen the report I compiled. Every one of them knew what was about to happen. Ethan didn't. He arrived seconds later, adjusting his cufflinks, his expression composed but his eyes darting with unease. The moment he saw me outside the room, his posture stiffened. "You're early," he said flatly. "So are you." We stood in silence for a moment. He stared at my badge again, junior executive, as if willing it to be true. I let him. "Whatever you're trying to pull," he said under his breath, "you're going to regret it." I tilted my head. "And what exactly am I pulling?" Before he could answer, the boardroom doors opened. Chairman Beckett appeared, wearing his usual composed, unreadable expression. "Miss Hayes." "Mr. Ward. We're ready for you." Ethan stepped forward, but Beckett's eyes never left mine. I gave a nod, then walked in, ahead of Ethan. That was the first domino. The room was bright and glass-walled, with a long mahogany table gleaming under recessed lights. Nameplates were arranged carefully. One at the head of the table read, "Clara Hayes, Chief Operations Officer." I saw the moment Ethan's eyes landed on it. The twitch in his jaw. The subtle shift in his step. "This is a mistake," he said, voice low, almost panicked. Chairman Beckett turned. "No, Ethan. It's not." I sat calmly in my chair, and opened my leather folder. "Shall we begin?" I asked. The board nodded as one. The presentation started with numbers. Not opinions. Not theories. Hard data, the kind even Ethan couldn't spin. We went through slide after slide detailing the operational inefficiencies plaguing Blackstone. Then came employee turnover. Innovation stagnation. Financial inconsistencies. By the time we reached slide 27, Ethan had stopped pretending to take notes. I paused. "Let's talk about cause." I clicked again, and his name filled the screen. Departmental performance under Ethan Ward, 2019 to present. Gasps were audible. I didn't look at him. I looked at the board. For the last 3 years, leadership under Mr. Ward has relied on outdated systems, fear-driven management, and internal fragmentation that has cost this company millions. In that time, 4 directors resigned. 7 projects were scrapped due to poor alignment. And in at least 3 confirmed quarters, performance numbers were modified. Now I looked at him. Ethan's mouth moved, but no words came. These findings, I continued, were verified by 2 independent audit teams. Additionally, exit interviews from over 40 employees cite a hostile environment and a lack of innovation opportunity under current leadership. Chairman Beckett leaned forward. "Miss Hayes has spent the last 6 months compiling this information. With full board approval." The words dropped like a gavel. Ethan finally stood. "This is absurd. She's manipulating you. This is revenge. We were in a relationship. This is personal." Beckett shook his head. "No, Ethan. This is professional. You made it personal when you used your position to undermine staff, inflate your performance, and push out talent who didn't serve your ego." Ethan's gaze darted between faces around the table, hoping for an ally, a crack in the wall. There were none. Then I stood, walking slowly toward the end of the room. 3 years ago, I had walked out of an office in tears. Today, I walked into one with authority. I didn't come here for revenge, I said quietly. I came because this company deserves better. Because the people who work here deserve better. You taught me how fragile power is when it's built on fear. I turned to the board. I'm not asking for Ethan's removal. Ethan blinked. I'm asking for his reassignment. Away from executive decisions. Away from people's careers. I believe in change. But not without accountability. The room was silent for a long beat. Then Chairman Beckett nodded. Effective immediately, Ethan Ward will be reassigned to project evaluation under the oversight of the innovation team. I looked at Ethan for the first time without fear. You'll still be at Blackstone. But you'll no longer lead. His face paled. His hands clenched. But there were no protests left in him. The boardroom emptied slowly. Whispers buzzed as members filed out, throwing me glances that held both curiosity and respect. When only Ethan and I remained, he finally spoke. You planned this. No, I said. You built this. I just turned on the lights. I left him there, standing in the ruins of his own creation. Outside, the floor was electric. Word traveled faster than email. Eyes followed me, but this time, not with doubt, with recognition. I walked back to my desk. Amanda, the executive assistant, was already updating the nameplate on the corner office. Clara Hayes, COO. The badge on my lapel still said junior executive. But not for long. And Ethan? He was still standing in that boardroom, surrounded by glass walls and the sound of his own silence. 10 o'clock had arrived. And so had the reckoning. By 10:30 a.m., the walls of Blackstone Global had started to breathe again. It was subtle at first, like the tension in everyone's shoulders had loosened just a little. Emails were still being sent. Coffee still poured. But people were watching. And talking. I stood at the window of what was now my office. The same corner space where Ethan had ruled for years, with closed doors, harsh tones, and a thick fog of fear. Amanda had already removed his framed certificates and replaced them with a simple, blank wall. It looked cleaner. Lighter. I've transferred your system access, Amanda said, entering with a tablet. You're fully synced across executive networks. The board asked if you'd like a formal announcement sent to all staff now, or wait until after lunch. I turned from the glass. Wait. Let them talk. Let it build. Sometimes whispers travel farther than declarations. She smiled like someone who had waited years to hear those words. Also, as she added, HR says Ethan's packing his desk. He hasn't said a word. Good, I said. Let him sit with it. He needs silence more than noise right now. I sat at my new desk, the same one where I had once stood across from him with shaking hands and a crushed proposal. The memory came back like a slow bruise. He had leaned back in that same chair, laughing as he said, "Know your place, Clara." Now I did. And it was here. Not just to lead, but to rebuild. The intercom blinked. Clara, said a soft voice. David Chin's asking if he can drop by. Says he has an idea. David. Junior analyst. Quiet, overlooked, always buried beneath Ethan's interruptions. I remembered him from the audit interviews, smart, methodical, but silenced by the hierarchy. Send him in. David entered, clutching a thin folder like it might vanish if he blinked. I heard what happened, he said nervously. And I wanted to say thank you. Not just for what you did this morning. But because. He paused. Because this is the first time in 3 years I've seen hope in this building. I gestured for him to sit. Tell me what's in the folder. Inside was a collaboration model. Something he and a few others had tried to pitch before, an interdepartmental innovation loop that Ethan had shot down for being too democratic. We thought maybe, it's stupid, but... It's brilliant, I said, flipping pages. And you're going to present it. He froze. Wait. Me? Yes. In the leadership meeting this afternoon. I'm not. You're ready, I said. The look on his face, the disbelief melting into pride, was better than any revenge I had ever imagined. It was the beginning of a culture shift. Not just punishing what was broken, but nurturing what had been buried. As David left, I caught sight of movement down the hallway. Ethan. A cardboard box in his arms. His suit jacket wrinkled. His face unreadable. Our eyes met through the glass. He paused. I didn't move. I didn't nod. I didn't gloat. I just watched. He turned and walked on, disappearing into the elevator. 1 floor down, to the project review unit. From CEO-level authority to a shared desk on a floor where people wore hoodies and worked in teams. I had pushed him out of power, but not out of the building. That was intentional. Redemption, if he wanted it, would not come from exile, but from humility. At 12:57 p.m., I sent the company-wide email. Effective immediately, Clara Hayes has assumed the role of Chief Operations Officer. Her primary objectives, organizational transparency, innovation revival, and collaborative restructuring across all departments. At 1:02 p.m., the office lit up. Notifications. Slacks. Pings. Glances. The dam had burst. By 1:30 p.m., Sarah from Product Development came by to shake my hand. At 1:50 p.m., IT requested approval for new Agile tools that had been denied under Ethan. And at 2:15 p.m., Amanda returned, holding a new nameplate. I took it from her and stood, walking to the door. The empty name holder outside, once etched with Ethan Ward in bold silver, was now blank. I pressed the new nameplate into place. Clara Hayes. Chief Operations Officer ****. The hallway went silent behind me. A small crowd had gathered. Some clapped. Others just watched, unsure of the rules now. I turned and said simply, this isn't the end of anything. It's the beginning of something better. That afternoon, I hosted the first open-door session Blackstone had seen in 5 years. Employees came in waves. Some shared frustrations. Others, ideas. A few simply said, thank you. By sunset, the glass walls no longer felt like barriers. They felt like windows into something new. And somewhere on the 3rd floor, Ethan Ward sat at a shared table, staring at a screen filled with project spreadsheets, realizing that power isn't taken in a single moment. It's earned in silence. And lost in echoes. By the end of my first week as Chief Operations Officer, the mood at Blackstone had shifted from suspicion to electricity. Change was happening. Fast. And for the first time in years, people weren't just surviving, they were engaging. Desks once separated by invisible walls of ego and fear were now hubs of spontaneous collaboration. Teams that had once guarded ideas like weapons were suddenly brainstorming together in open lounges. The 3rd floor lounge, once deserted, now buzzed with life. And all of it had started with a single, quiet collapse, Ethan's. Every morning, I passed by the shared workspace outside Innovation Review, where Ethan now sat. He no longer wore his tailored suits. He didn't bark orders. He barely looked up. But he was there. Present. Watching. Enduring. And that was important. Revenge isn't just about watching someone fall. It's about giving them a front row seat to your rise. Still, I didn't gloat. I didn't even acknowledge him. The silence between us had become more powerful than words. It echoed. "Miss Hayes," Amanda said one morning, handing me a report. "Performance metrics are up 18% in just 4 days." I nodded, flipping through. And the innovation loop. David Chin's proposal got approved unanimously. R&D and marketing are already prototyping together. And employee feedback. She smirked. "They're calling it the Hayes effect." I paused. Not out of pride, but out of something else. A quiet awe. I had once stood outside a door like this, badge shaking in my hand, praying someone would see my worth. Now people were building doorways to bring me their ideas. I hadn't just changed jobs. I had changed gravity. But then came a moment I hadn't prepared for. It was Thursday morning. I arrived early, earlier than usual. The floor was almost empty. The coffee machine had barely started hissing steam when I saw him. Ethan. Already seated. Already working. Not faking it. Actually, working. He didn't see me. His eyes were locked on his screen, deep in something. He looked older than I remembered. Smaller. Not physically, but something in the way he sat. Shoulders rounded. Mouth tight. There was no arrogance in him anymore. Just focus. I stepped back, unseen. Later that day, Amanda brought in a document. Anonymously submitted, but I recognized the writing. It was Ethan's. A proposal. Clean. Strategic. Focused on long-term integration between sales and operations. And it was good. Too good to ignore. Should I file it? Amanda asked. I hesitated. Then nodded. Put it through the official system. Treat it like any other. Because that was the new rule at Blackstone. Ideas stood on merit. Not names. Still, the irony wasn't lost on me. The same man who had once dismissed me for thinking too far ahead was now trying to contribute from the bottom. And I had to ask myself the question. Was this revenge? Or redemption? ***. That afternoon, I held a leadership roundtable, open to all department heads, no closed doors, no hierarchy. David Chin presented his collaboration model again, this time backed by fresh results, 2 stalled products revived, a 15% drop in email bottlenecks, and a joint proposal with HR to build a mentorship program for junior staff. When the room applauded, David turned to me, not for approval, but for recognition. I gave it. You made this happen, I said. He shook his head. No, you did. You gave us the room. And it hit me, the real power of leadership wasn't in decision-making. It was in permission. Permission to speak. To build. To rise. And maybe, just maybe, to fall and try again. Later that evening, as the office emptied, I stayed behind. I liked those quiet hours. The hum of city lights outside, the occasional ding of an elevator, the stillness that came after the day's storm. I sat at my desk, reviewing files when a soft knock came at the door. I looked up. It was Ethan. He didn't step in. Just stood there, a man who had once wielded control like a sword, now unsure if he was even allowed to speak. I wanted to thank you, he said. Voice low. Measured. For what? For not firing me. I stared at him. He didn't flinch. Didn't look away. I've been paying attention, he added. watching what's changing here. It's real. And it's better. I didn't respond. He took a breath. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. But I'm trying to learn. And I hope one day, what I do here might matter again. I didn't soften. I didn't rise. I just nodded. Then do the work, I said. Let that speak for you. He nodded once. Then walked away. I sat there, staring at the door long after it closed. Because that moment, quiet, simple, wasn't part of the revenge plan. But it mattered. Not as a turning point. As a mirror. I had climbed out of a crater he created, built a future from ashes, and proven every cruel word wrong. But now I had to decide something harder. What do you do when the person you destroyed is finally willing to be rebuilt? The next day, I asked Amanda to assign Ethan to a new mentorship pilot project. Quietly. Without his name on the press. If he wanted redemption, he'd have to earn it. Just like I did. 3 weeks into my tenure as COO, Blackstone Global felt like an entirely different company. But the transformation wasn't flashy. There were no banners, no corporate celebrations, no self-congratulatory memos. Change came in small things, the kind no one outside the building would ever notice. Like the way people now made eye contact in meetings. Or how junior analysts no longer shrank in their chairs when a senior executive entered the room. Or how the door to my office, once a symbol of exclusion, was almost always open. Culture is like concrete. You can't reshape it overnight. But with the right tools, enough pressure, and the willingness to tear up the old foundation, you can rebuild something stronger. Still, the ghosts lingered. Old habits die hard. Some employees still whispered before sharing ideas. Others kept one foot in the past, unsure whether they could trust the light they now worked under. That's when I decided to do something symbolic. We hosted the listening sessions. Not a memo. Not a survey. A literal room. No hierarchy. No agenda. 1 hour. One microphone. Anyone could speak. The first session was awkward. Silence pressed against the glass walls like fog. But then Sarah from HR stood up. I was scared every day I came to work, she said. Not because I was weak. But because I had no voice. And now I do. So here's what I think. And she spoke. Really spoke. About the dysfunction. The rot. The fatigue. The fear of speaking up under Ethan. The silent exodus of talented people. She didn't say it with bitterness. She said it with relief. By the end of the hour, 3 more employees spoke up. 1 cried. And when the session ended, no one wanted to leave. That was the moment I knew, this wasn't a company anymore. It was healing. Meanwhile, Ethan had been silent. He showed up. He worked. He participated in the mentorship pilot. And he submitted ideas through the anonymous channel, never asking for recognition, never signing his name. But something shifted when I passed by the 3rd floor one afternoon. I saw him. Sitting with a group of interns. Not lecturing. Not directing. Just listening. Taking notes. And then he said something I never expected. I used to think leadership was about control, he told them. Turns out it's about clarity. You can't fake that forever. Eventually, people see who you are. I paused outside the room, unseen. He didn't know I was there. He wasn't performing. And for the first time, I believed him. The next day, Amanda entered my office with a smirk. You'll want to see this. She handed me a packet. A formal application. Ethan Ward was requesting a position in strategic innovation development. No ego. No title demand. Just one line in the cover letter, asterisk, I'd like to earn my place again. From the ground up. Asterisk. I stared at the paper for a long moment. Then I set it aside. Not with rejection. Not with approval. Just with consideration. Because leadership isn't about granting redemption. It's about making space for it. The following week, the quarterly financial report came in. Revenue, up 26%. Employee satisfaction, record high. Retention, 94%. Shareholder trust, once wobbly and cautious, had solidified. Chairman Beckett sent me a brief message. Asterisk, this company doesn't just work. It breathes again. Thank you. Asterisk. But I knew we weren't done. We had one more test to pass. The Global Shareholders Forum, a once-a-year summit of investors, executives, and global partners. It was the company's spotlight moment, and this time, the keynote speaker wasn't the CEO. It was me. My name had been added to the program 2 weeks ago. Quietly. Without fanfare. I stood backstage the morning of the event, heels silent against the hardwood floor, hands steady. This was bigger than the boardroom. Bigger than Ethan. This was the world stage. Amanda handed me a tablet. You ready? I nodded. But before I stepped out, I paused. Ethan stood by the side exit, adjusting AV cables. Supporting the tech team. Wearing a Blackstone hoodie like every other operations volunteer. No suit. No spotlight. But he met my eyes across the room. And nodded. Not with bitterness. With something that looked like respect. I turned and stepped onto the stage. The lights were warm. The auditorium full. Every screen lit with the company's new slogan, Together, we build better. I looked out at the crowd. At my team. My legacy. My transformation. And I began. I want to tell you a story, I said, voice even. Not about numbers. Not about graphs. But about failure. About the quiet kind, the one that doesn't make headlines but erodes cultures from the inside. The audience leaned in. I've seen what happens when fear replaces vision. I've seen how silence can cost millions. But I've also seen what happens when a company chooses honesty. Transparency. And most of all, humanity. I shared the story of Blackstone, stripped of its sugarcoating. The toxicity, the losses, the leadership breakdown. And then the rebuild. The voices that were once dismissed now driving innovation. The interns mentoring senior staff. The rise of people like David Chin, who once feared to speak and now designed our core systems. I closed with this. We don't grow through perfection. We grow through pain. But only if we dare to keep the door open, even to those who once shut it in our face. When I stepped off stage, the room was silent. Then came the applause. Not polite. Not corporate. But real. Backstage, Ethan stood in the shadows. And for the first time, I stepped toward him. You showed up, I said. He nodded. I had to. I handed him the signed approval for his application. No shortcuts, I said. No shortcuts, he replied. He turned and walked away. Not defeated. But different. And as I watched him go, I realized something. Revenge had brought me to the top. But grace was going to keep me there. It was a quiet Wednesday evening when the letter arrived. Not an email. Not a text. A real letter, thick envelope, no return address, my name written in careful, slanted script. It waited on my desk as I returned from an off-site meeting, the city skyline already blushing with twilight behind me. Amanda hadn't said a word about it. Maybe she didn't know what it was. Maybe no one did. I stared at it for a while. Then I opened it. The handwriting was familiar before I even read the signature. Clara, I imagine this is the last thing you expected to receive. And I wouldn't blame you for throwing it away. But if you're reading this, thank you. Not for forgiveness. I'm not foolish enough to ask for that. But for what you did instead. For showing me who I really was, and giving me a glimpse of who I could still be. It was from Ethan's wife. Or rather, ex-wife, I learned as I continued reading. I left Ethan a year ago. Long before your return. I didn't leave because of you. I left because of who he became after you. Angry. Paranoid. Miserable. He blamed you, at first. But over time, I realized something else. He wasn't mourning your betrayal. He was mourning the version of himself he saw through your eyes, someone small, afraid, clinging to power because he had nothing else. I swallowed hard. The letter felt like a window into a room I had once been locked inside. The news of your appointment made headlines. I won't lie, I smiled. And when he told me about your restructuring plan, about the mentorship project you assigned him to, he didn't sound bitter. He sounded ashamed. For the first time in years, he stopped making excuses. He started listening. I paused, looking out at the city. The lights of 1,000 offices burned across the skyline, symbols of late-night meetings, quiet decisions, and people trying to build something that mattered. I returned to the letter. I suppose I'm writing not just to acknowledge what you've done, but to tell you something Ethan never could. You were never too ambitious. You were never emotional or difficult. You were just ahead of your time. And when he couldn't keep up, he chose to crush what he feared. Thank you for surviving him, and thank you for not becoming him. There was no signature. Just one last line. May we all be lucky enough to work under someone like you someday. I folded the letter slowly. Sat back in my chair. The weight of it pressed against me in a way nothing else had. Not the promotions. Not the applause. Not even the day I took over Ethan's office. Because this wasn't about victory anymore. It was about clarity. About what kind of person you become when no one is watching. The next morning, the office hummed with a strange kind of energy. Not tense. Not distracted. Just aware. People were starting to believe that this wasn't just a phase. That this change, the openness, the honesty, the trust, was real. David Chin stopped by with another proposal. A cross-office innovation sprint, built to solve internal delays between marketing and product. R&D says they're in, he added, smiling. And, he paused, almost sheepishly, Ethan's volunteered to mentor the junior team. I raised an eyebrow. He volunteered. David nodded. Didn't even want credit. Said the idea belonged to the team. Now that was a headline. I approved the budget, I said. Make sure the interns get first look. Later that afternoon, during a walk through the third floor, I passed by the Innovation Lounge. I paused at the glass door. Ethan was there. Seated across from two interns. Not talking. Listening. One of them, a young woman named Lena, was explaining an idea using a whiteboard. Ethan nodded slowly. Asked a question. Jotted down notes. It was a small moment. But it was real. I continued walking. Back upstairs, Chairman Beckett waited in my office, sipping a black coffee like always. "Word travels," he said as I entered. I laughed softly. "It always does. The Singapore office's quarterly report just came in. They're already replicating your mentorship framework. Looks like you're starting to export culture." "Let's hope they handle it gently," I replied. "It's fragile. Until it's not." Beckett leaned forward. "There's talk about featuring you on the leadership panel at the Global Women in Business Forum this fall. They want you to headline." My breath caught, just slightly. That was big. Massive. Public. "That's a long way from where I started," I murmured. He nodded. "That's why they want you." And suddenly I saw it all at once, the arc I had walked without ever truly seeing it. From a crushed analyst with a broken proposal, to a woman rewriting the rules at the table she was once denied a seat at. And still, the most powerful thing I had done was give someone else the chance to change. Even the man who once told me I couldn't succeed without him. Because in the end, revenge was never about proving him wrong. It was about proving myself right, and never shrinking again. As Chairman Beckett stood to leave, he paused at the door. "You've built something rare here, Clara. Don't forget that. The real work is protecting it." He walked out. And I sat there for a long moment, hand resting on the letter still tucked in my desk drawer. Not to reread it. Just to know it was there. Proof that sometimes the most unexpected victories come in envelopes you never saw coming. By the start of the 4th month, the stories had begun to spread far beyond the walls of Blackstone Global. I'd started getting emails from strangers, from women in middle management thanking me for proving it could be done, from interns halfway across the world asking for mentorship resources, and even from rival executives requesting copies of our internal restructuring model. Our systems hadn't just evolved. Our culture had gone viral. One morning, Amanda walked into my office, holding her tablet with both hands like it was fragile. "You made the front page," she said, sliding it to me. There it was. Bold font. Polished photo. The title read, "The Woman Who Took Her Ex's Company, and Made It Better." I read the headline twice. And then the subheading. Asterisk, How Clara Hayes Transformed Corporate Revenge into Cultural Redemption. Asterisk. I leaned back in my chair. There was no denying it anymore. This story had left the building. Across the office, employees passed copies of the article around like it was a rare artifact. People laughed, nodded, whispered. Some cheered. I noticed David Chin clip it and tape it to the whiteboard in the break room. Sarah from HR called it, "your origin story." But I didn't feel like a superhero. I felt like a woman who had clawed her way through glass and fire, and somehow come out clean on the other side. Still, the attention made things complicated. Especially for Ethan. He had been handling his new role well, quietly mentoring, submitting real strategies, rebuilding relationships with those he'd once dismissed. But the article brought everything back. The past. The betrayal. The names. And it didn't spare him. One paragraph read, Asterisk, the previous executive's fall from grace serves as a case study in leadership rooted in ego, not vision. Asterisk. His name wasn't mentioned. But everyone knew. That afternoon, I found him in the third-floor analytics bay. He was alone, staring at his computer screen, shoulders hunched forward, not with shame, but exhaustion. I didn't say anything. I just sat down beside him, both of us watching the cursor blink on his monitor. After a while, he broke the silence. I read it. I figured. They're not wrong, he said. But, it still stings. I nodded. Truth usually does. He hesitated, then turned to me. I want to leave. That caught me off guard. I don't think I can be useful here anymore, he continued. Not with everyone looking at me like I'm a ghost from a past they want to forget. They're not looking at you like that. Yes, they are. I didn't argue. Because he was right, in part. Some still saw him as a warning. As a scar. As a reminder of what leadership used to look like. But I saw something else. You don't need to leave, I said finally. You just need to stop asking to be someone new. He frowned. Own who you were, I continued. But live who you are now. Let people watch you walk that line. That's what they really need to see, not a perfect leader. A changed one. He stared at me. Not as a rival. Not as a regret. But as a man still trying to understand why someone he tried to erase was offering him a place at the table. Do you believe people can really change? He asked. I didn't flinch. I believe they can choose to. He looked away for a long moment. Then he nodded, slowly. I'm staying, he said. But I'm done with titles. I just want to help. And that was the moment I stopped seeing him as my past. And started seeing him as part of the future. The next day, something unprecedented happened. Ethan was invited to co-lead an interdepartmental training seminar on ethical leadership, by the very team he used to intimidate. And he said yes. Not because he wanted credit. But because he knew it mattered. He opened the seminar with this. I used to lead with fear because I didn't know what else would work. I thought respect came from titles. From results. From control. But then I watched someone walk back into a company I once owned, and build something better without any of that. That's how I learned the difference between leading and commanding. No one clapped. They just listened. Because truth, when spoken without ego, doesn't need applause. Later that week, Chairman Beckett called me into his office. We've had a request, he said. From whom? MIT. They want you to guest lecture. I blinked. They're teaching a new course, Transformational Leadership in the Age of Crisis. You're the first case study. I let that settle. The girl who had been laughed out of a proposal room. The woman who'd rebuilt her future in silence. The leader who now shaped not just a company, but a generation. I'll do it, I said. Thought you would. I stood and headed to the door, but Beckett stopped me. Oh, and one more thing, he said, smiling. You've got mail. He handed me a handwritten envelope. Again. I raised an eyebrow. This one was from someone I never expected. My old manager at Embercore. The one who had ignored Ethan's whispers. The one who had given me a tiny, temporary desk when no one else would. Inside was a card. Simple. Gray. Embossed with her name. Asterisk Clara, I saw the article. I knew you had it in you. You were always too good for their rules. I'm glad you broke them. Asterisk. And below that, in smaller ink. Asterisk, Pirares, there's an opening on our board if you ever want to join us. Asterisk. I laughed out loud. Because sometimes, revenge doesn't just come full circle. It expands the circle so wide that it becomes something else entirely. Something bigger than titles. Bigger than power. Something that looks a lot like legacy. 6 months after the boardroom that changed everything, Blackstone Global was unrecognizable. The old metrics. Shattered. Innovation output, doubled. Quarterly revenue, up 40%. Retention, 97%. And for the first time in its history, the company was listed on Forbes' top 10 most ethical workplaces. But what mattered more to me than those numbers were the names behind them. David Chin now led the Innovation Loop division, a role we created just for him. Sarah from HR. She'd overhauled the company's onboarding process and launched a mentorship program used by 3 other firms. Even Ethan. He now co-led leadership development, not as a gesture of pity, but because, through humility and accountability, he had become what he never was before. Respected. One day, I passed by the second-floor training room and saw him sitting with a new hire, a young woman nervously holding a folder. Ethan was listening, nodding, not interrupting. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Because the loudest change is the one you don't have to announce. Back in my office, I sat down to review the latest proposal, a potential merger with a European firm that specialized in AI-powered logistics. It was forward-thinking, clean, and exactly the kind of partnership Blackstone would have ignored a year ago. Amanda stepped in. "You've got a call," she said. "Who from?" "Not a who," she said. "A where?" She handed me the tablet. Stanford. They wanted me to headline a summit on corporate evolution and cultural resilience. Another invitation. Another stage. But that wasn't all. They also wanted me to teach. Not a single class. A semester. An entire course, built around what we'd done at Blackstone. They wanted the full story. The blueprint. The method. And they wanted me to deliver it. I didn't respond immediately. I walked to the window, the city stretching wide beneath me, glass and steel catching the morning sun. I had built something remarkable here. Not just a company. A culture. But I felt it now, that familiar tension in my chest. The same one I'd felt when I first sat across from the board, 3 years after Ethan broke me down. The feeling that something new was calling. I turned back to Amanda. "Do you think I'm done here?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "I think Blackstone is no longer about just you," she said. "Which means, maybe it's time." The words hit like wind against a cliffside. I wasn't the foundation anymore. I was the force that started the movement, and now the movement had legs of its own. Still, I needed to know the truth. So I went to see Ethan. He was in the lower floor innovation lab, working with a project team on restructured training models. When he saw me, he stood, but I waved for him to stay seated. "I have a question," I said. "Shoot." "If I left, would this place fall apart?" He didn't laugh. He didn't dodge. He looked around, at the team, at the open glass walls, at the hum of an office finally in rhythm with itself. "No," he said quietly. "Because you didn't build a kingdom. You built a compass." I sat with that. Not a throne. Not a crown. A compass. That night, I walked the building one last time after hours. Each floor. Each hallway. I paused at the old desk I'd once sat at with a fake badge and a silent plan. I remembered the weight of the notebook I'd carried, filled with strategies I wasn't supposed to know. I remembered the clock ticking down to 10 a.m., the moment everything would break. And I remembered how Ethan had leaned on my desk with a smirk, certain that he had one. I ran my hand across the smooth surface now, bare except for a single sticky note someone had left behind. It read, "If you're reading this, it means you survived. Welcome." I smiled. I returned to my office and began writing my letter of intent to the board. Not a resignation. A transition. I would spend the next quarter documenting everything, the methods, the frameworks, the playbooks. I would personally train my replacement. Not a successor. A steward. The following week, Chairman Beckett called a private meeting. "I've heard the whispers," he said. "They're true, I replied. He looked at me with something between sadness and pride. You know, he said, when we brought you on, I thought we were buying a strategy. But what we got was a soul transplant. Blackstone's always had a soul, I said. It just forgot how to breathe. He nodded. Have you told Ethan? Yes. And? He said I built a compass. Beckett smiled, eyes crinkling. Then it's time. The next day, I made the announcement. There was no ceremony. No send-off. Just a simple message. Change should never depend on a single person. It should belong to everyone who believes in it. My next chapter is about sharing what we've learned, so others can build something even better. And I ended it with the words that had once haunted me, but now carried new meaning. Success is the best revenge. But building others to succeed. That's the real revolution. That afternoon, I left the building through the front doors. No security escort. No box in my arms. No bitterness. Just clarity. As I stepped into the sunlight, my phone buzzed with a new message. From Ethan. The mentorship team wants to name the new leadership model after you. I told them not to. You wouldn't want that. But just so you know, they still call it the Hayes method behind your back. I laughed. And typed back. Let them. Just make sure they keep using it. Then I walked on, toward a future not built out of revenge, but out of revolution. 1 year to the day after I walked into Blackstone Global with a fake title and a quiet plan, I stood behind a podium in a room filled with people who had no idea who I used to be. The Global Leadership Summit had never felt so still. Behind me, the screen read. Clara Hayes, architect of the modern workplace. Not survivor. Not COO. Not the woman who took down her ex. Just architect. Because that's what this story had become. Not about revenge. But about design. About building. About reshaping something broken, and leaving behind blueprints for others to follow. My opening line was simple. I came here to burn a bridge. But what I didn't expect was that, halfway through, I'd learn how to build a better one. There were no dramatic pauses. No applause breaks. Just steady, measured honesty. I told them everything. About being laughed out of boardrooms. About the temporary badge. About Ethan. About the fire that used to fuel me, rage, shame, rejection, and how that fire eventually became warmth. Not destruction. Creation. I told them what real change looks like, people stepping up, not because they're told to, but because someone finally made room for their voice. And I told them this. Revenge might get you in the door. But legacy keeps the door open for others. After I finished, the crowd stood. Not clapping for a title. But for the truth. Backstage, as the lights dimmed, I received a quiet knock on the green room door. Ethan stepped in. No suit. Just a blazer and slacks. Casual. Human. You didn't mention my name, he said. I didn't have to. He nodded, almost smiling. You gave me too much credit and not enough. All at once. You earned your part of the story, I said. The good, the bad, and the rebuild. He looked down at his hands. You know, he said, the thing I'm most proud of now. None of it is about power. It's the team. Watching them rise without fear. That's what I missed all those years. You didn't miss it, I said. You just weren't ready to see it. We stood there in silence. Two people who had once defined each other by damage. Now, by distance. Growth. Clarity. I'm starting something new, I said. An institute. Leadership reimagined. Think of it like an ecosystem, for future rebuilders. He raised an eyebrow. Need a guest speaker. Don't push your luck. He laughed. Genuinely this time. And then he left. Later that evening, alone in my hotel suite, I opened my laptop. Dozens of messages waited. One caught my eye. A young analyst from Brazil. She had watched my summit talk online. Her message was simple. Asterisk, they told me I was too ambitious. That I asked too many questions. I almost believed them. But then I saw you speak. And now I know, I'm not too much. They were just too small. Asterisk. I stared at those words for a long time. That was the story, right there. Not the headlines. Not the metrics. The echo. The ripple that begins when one woman stops apologizing for her fire, and instead turns it into light. The next morning, I walked through the Stanford campus, where I was now guest lecturing. Students passed by, notebooks under their arms, ambition in their eyes. I remembered being their age. Hungry. Hopeful. Terrified. And I remembered the moment someone tried to cut that hunger down with a single sentence, asterisk, you'll never succeed without me. Asterisk. I'd carried those words like a curse. Until I realized something important. They weren't a curse. They were a start line. A push off the cliff that taught me how to fly. Now, years later, I stood at a different kind of edge. Not to jump. But to guide. To say, here's what they won't teach you in school. Here's how you survive the rooms that weren't built for you. Here's how you rewrite the rules without losing yourself. And most importantly, here's how you win without becoming the villain in someone else's story. As I entered the lecture hall, the students stood. No one had told them to. They just did. Not out of protocol. But because somehow, over the last year, the story had outgrown me. It now belonged to every person who had ever been underestimated. Dismissed. Broken down. And still built something anyway. Before I spoke, I glanced down at my phone, one final message from Amanda, back at Blackstone. Asterisk, all systems holding. Leadership strong. They're doing it. Without you. Asterisk. I smiled. That was the dream all along. To build something that didn't need me to stand. To walk away from the fire, not because it was done burning. But because it had already warmed everyone it needed to. And that was the sweetest revenge of all.